Good afternoon and welcome to our second webinar in the encounter phase of our Nurturing Joy initiative. This webinar is called Practical Solutions for Encounter with Michelle Braden. Michelle is Youth Ministry Director for the Archdiocese of Regina. I'll introduce her a little bit more in a minute. My name is Claire Bondi. I'm the Director of Lay Ecclesial Ministry and Ongoing Formation for the Diocese of London, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Let's just pause for a moment. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Send forth your Spirit, O Lord, and fill the hearts of your people with an ardent desire to follow Jesus, to be his missionary disciples. Fill us with joy and a desire to know your word. May we boldly proclaim the good news to others, for when we help others to know that God loves them, they will know true happiness. Fill us with a deep desire for the Eucharist. May we recognize Jesus in the proclamation of the scriptures and in the breaking of the bread. For when we are united with Jesus, joy is constantly born anew. Fill us with a true love of neighbor. May we seek opportunities for reconciliation and with big hearts serve those in need. For in serving them, we know we are serving your Son. We ask you today, Lord, to welcome into your kingdom Deacon Dennis Revest, who has served your people so well. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. And may his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed rest through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. I get the joy now. I'm going to highlight Michelle here. And Michelle, with your two little icons behind you, you look a little bit like Princess Leia. But where did my notes go? Okay, here they are. So I met Michelle a number of years ago when I was doing the Family and Youth Ministry specialist for the diocese, and just a warm, wonderful individual who personifies hospitality and welcoming. And Michelle has worked for the last 11 years as coordinator of youth and young adult ministry for the Diocese of Regina in Saskatchewan. The 12 years previous to that, she did parish youth ministry alongside her work in an alternative school with kids who suffered with behavioral challenges. Her work at the Archdiocese sees her working closely with parishes, schools, and young adult communities where she's privileged to be an agent of encounter. She facilitates approximately 40 retreats a year for students and staff and sees firsthand the hunger of people for Jesus. Sadly, she often grieves a lack of places to send them, where they and their questions and struggles would be received with holy hospitality. Love that phrase, Michelle, holy hospitality. At home, Michelle has enjoyed 42 years of marriage with her husband, Ron, and is a proud grandma of 10 little souls. I know when I see Michelle, she does not look like a grandma of 10 to me. So Michelle, we're super glad to have you here with us today. Today's session is just going to be a little bit different. I just realized I need to do not disturb on my phone because for sure it will ring while we're meeting. A little bit different than last week's presentation in that Michelle and I are going to have a dialogue. And again, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can put them in the Q&A box. And at the end of the presentation, Michelle will field those questions for you. But I know that Michelle's work has been a lot of hands-on stuff. Michelle, I know that hospitality is something you feel really passionately about. I have been the recipient of that hospitality. And so I know you live it and breathe it. So I guess let's start by, what are your thoughts about the importance of hospitality and welcome in our ministry and parishes?
Well, thank you, Claire. And I'm so excited to be in London this morning. So I first of all, thank you for asking me to do this. It is something that's really important to me. As I was preparing this, I was sitting in my kitchen at my table and I was looking at a needlepoint that I did years and years and years ago when my kids were babies, and you know, I never got to leave the house, and I was up half the night anyway. So, and it says this: "Hail guest, we ask not what thou art. If friend, we greet thee hand and heart. If stranger, such no longer be. If foe, our love will conquer thee." And I just think that that sums up hospitality, regardless of where it is being, in what setting we're talking about it. I was looking at your speaker that you had a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that he had said was, hospitality creates relationship. Relationship builds trust, and trust is essential for conversion. And so hospitality has to be personal. It can't be corporate. You can't just build a committee to do it. It needs to become part of the culture. And it can be the work of a small committee who coordinates and trains the parish in their hospitable responses. But this will not move forward in any meaningful way unless many people are motivated. It should become ideally an expectation of the culture of our parishes that everyone has a role to play in hospitality. And it's important to note that hospitality isn't a piece of what we do. It's at the heart of what we do. It is at the heart of sharing the gospel. It's at the heart of the Eucharist. For goodness sakes, we come together to break bread. It's the example that Jesus modeled for us. He gathered people, he fed them, he listened to them, he healed them, he cried with them. And also of note, he went to them. He did not just sit in the temple and wait for them to come to him, right? So these are all just wonderful examples that Jesus has given us for hospitality. And it dawned on me too, as I was thinking, that we have in our Catholic faith have so many opportunities to encounter people and show them the love of Christ. Like people bring their kids for baptism, and they bring them for sacrament prep and for funerals. And do you have Catholic schools there, Claire? No. So anyways,
I was muted. We have fully funded Catholic schools here.
Okay, so we have Catholic schools, and these are all things that our Protestant brothers and sisters would like kill to have, is these opportunities where people come to us, you know, maybe not too sure, maybe not fully engaged or enthused, but they're coming. And what an opportunity we had, and I think we so take it for granted. But since you're here, I think it's safe to assume that you understand the importance of hospitality. And so I think, you know, we can start certainly there, considering what this looks like when it's lived out well. But before we dig in, please let me be very clear, because I think this is important, that I'm gonna throw a lot of ideas at you that I think that are awesome in an ideal world, and you're gonna have lots of your own. And I know it's easy to sometimes leave a workshop like this feeling completely overwhelmed, you know? So I think it's important for us to understand that any small step is a step forward, right? This is not a bingo card. You're not going to do all the things. But if you did a couple of the things, you might get a row and a bingo. So, so to just know that any steps forward that we take in the areas of hospitality are good and important. We don't have to do them all right now.
I loved your bingo card analogy. And I know when we were talking about this webinar, you mentioned that. But I also think the other beautiful thing is that this is bingo where we can all play on the same card.
Yes.
Right. So
many bingo analogies.
Yeah. So we, you know, we not each one of us individually has to do all the things.
Right.
So
can. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michelle, what do you think the gifts and qualities are that are needed for those of us who are leading, sort of trying to lead the way in hospitality?
So I'm going to give you a list now, and I had a PowerPoint. If we'd been able to figure this out a little sooner, I could have brought these up for you. So I apologize.
Do you have your PowerPoint? Do you want to try and share it?
I can try.
I mean, you should be able to just share screen in the same way that you do on a regular Zoom.
Okay.
If you have it up. sorry, this is the problem. We didn't have a chance to practice this. So this is why Michelle is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just see if we can make it happen.
Okay.
If not, we'll get it to people after, but.
Okay. We'll make one attempt here quickly.
Okay.
and all right. So let me see. I'll just need to open it here first.
Okay. We'll edit this piece out of the recorded piece.
Aren't you both lucky that are getting it live? Okay.
The joys.
Okay.
I think we're good, Michelle.
Okay, just a second, but you're seeing it all. I need to.
That's okay. Slideshow. Beautiful.
Okay. And so
Great.
what gifts and
all right.
qualities from you?
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll talk about these. They're all listed here, but we'll talk about them a couple at a time. And a few of them I have maybe a little story to share with. So what gifts and qualities are needed? And again, not everybody needs to have all the qualities, right? But we can find folks who have these. So people who are focused, recognizing that the root of all hospitality is meeting people's need, be seen and heard and loved. So, people who are laser focused and who will keep bringing us back to our core, right? Because hospitality can very easily, I think it very easily becomes assigned to the fluff category sometimes. And we need people who will refocus us and help us to remember that it is not the fluff, it is the substance. Folks who are persistent, inviting people to grow or to serve wherever whatever we're inviting them to. Persistence is key. So I think that we give up too quickly, both in how many committees have we been on where something is suggested and it said, well, we tried that one, so it didn't work. And it was 20 years ago and we tried it for a week and it didn't work. So to be persistent in reaching out to people, being persistent in trying to find our volunteers, being persistent in inviting people into, into the sacraments, into our parishes. I'm just going to share a little story with when I was in parish ministry. I had this beautiful choir of teens and young adults, and at one point it had grown to 50 of them. Like it was hilarious because it wasn't people joined the youth ministry and then joined choirs, as they joined this choir and then I pulled them into youth ministry. But there was a young man who played drums, and we really needed a drummer and he really needed to be with us. And so I invited him many times. And then I reached the point where a person can only take so much rejection, right? So I decided that to leave him alone. And so at one point, his cousin who was in our choir said to me, I said, so how is he doing? And she said, he's good. He says, you haven't asked again lately. So I asked again. And sure enough, he joined our choir. He ended up coming to World Youth Day with us. And it became this whole journey. But you need to be able to risk rejection. You need to be able to be persistent, like not in a stalkerish kind of way. There needs to be a balance there. You need to give time in between, and you need to people need to not feel pressured, but don't take no the first time. It would be my advice. Sometimes it's just not right.
I used to tell people, if now's not the right time, just know that I'll come back to you. Warn them, I'm coming back. So yeah.
Like I see this in you, and we will probably chat again. So outside the box thinkers, please do this. Outside the box thinkers. Hospitality is not a one size fits all, and it needs people of all ages and stages of life to offer hospitality, right? So kids are awesome at welcoming people, right? Moms with babes in arms, grandparents. This need not just be the ministry of one, demographic in our parishes, for sure. Those who put people first. Intimacy and that's not a word we use a lot in church, but I think it's an important word. Intimacy is one of the goals of hospitality. And it's to make people feel seen and known and not just a part of the crowd. So to take every opportunity for dealing with people one-on-one instead of a crowd, and that will take a village and then some. That's why this can't just be a committee, right? Michael Manhart, some of you may know of him. He's a speaker in the States. He came up and shared a story with us once, and I just thought, wow. And again, don't be overwhelmed by the enormity of this, but if we can just make people aware. He tells a story of a young man in his like mid-20s who was in a parish, and he came to church one Sunday and he had his hat on during Mass. Well, you can imagine where this is going. So from the pulpit, or from the altar, the priest called him out, said, "Excuse me, young man, we do not wear our hat in church." And the young man stood up and he said, "Thank you for noticing." He said, "This was my wife's parish. We were married here. We were married here 3 years ago. She's been gone for a year. And I have been coming every Sunday without her, and nobody has even noticed.
Oh my gosh.
So I will take my hat off. Thank you for noticing."
Wow.
Like that's gut-wrenching stuff. But we need to talk to the people sitting beside us that we don't know. So putting people first and not, seeing the person, so important. Those who can create beautiful spaces, who are the decorators among you? This is a passion of mine, and I think this is much underestimated. We run a rally every year, a youth rally. We run it at a high school, in a school gym. And I always say, when those kids from that school come into that gym, they need to know they're not in the gym anymore, that this is now sacred space. Not that the gym isn't sacred space as well, but environment is so important. I remember going to, it was actually an Alpha that I was invited to once as a participant, and I went, and they were good people, but there was, I don't know, maybe 20 people in total in this huge gymnasium, and like just 3 little tables in the middle of the room. You felt like you were in an island, and like there was just nothing about it that was cozy or comfortable or intimate. So those who can create beautiful spaces, centers of beauty, cutting the room in half, creating a little corner so it feels more intimate, you need those folks in your corner as well. Power prayers, right? Covering everything and covering your spaces in prayer. Like if you have the resource, pray over every chair that those sacrament prep families are going to sit in before they come, So bring prayer and opportunities for encounter into your programs and expect miracles, right? Ask people if you can pray for them. I said I do a lot of high school retreats, and it's interesting how when we started, how anxious all the staff, how anxious everybody was to protect these kids. Like, they're not ready. You can't do this. They're not ready. They're not church. I said, well, I'm not going to do it in the first half hour, right? Like, we'll give time to build intimacy, build trust, build relationship. Sometimes we have to stay an hour past when the retreat is done because we're still praying with kids. Like, offering to pray for people. I'm not saying nobody, and if we have the manpower, what we do is we don't just ask them to come if they want prayer. We go and we sit beside them and say, how can we pray for you? Is there a way we can pray for you? And there are some kids that say, no, I'm good, thank you. They would be the absolute minority. It is very rare that a kid doesn't say to us, this is how you could pray for me. And, so like those families that are coming to us for sacrament prep, they're coming with all kinds of hurt, all kinds of stuff. And like I said, I wouldn't suggest you start there, but as you build relationship, offer to pray for them, right there. Not just when they go home, pray over them, not just for them when they're gone. Resource people. I mean, who are your people with the contacts? Who are the movers and shakers? Who knows the restaurant owners? Who has, you need resources to offer hospitality. And if you have somebody who knows all the folks and also understands that spending money or time on hospitality is not a luxury, that it is the heart of growing disciples and strengthening parish life, then that is a key piece. In my ministry, okay, I don't know how my bishop will be fine. I was gonna say, I have a beer budget.
Yeah.
But I have young adults, and how do I thank volunteers? How do I, minister to a small group of young adults that are trying to get something going? That's what I take them for a beer sometimes. Not a huge piece of my budget, but I said, I need a hospitality budget, and for the demographic that I'm working with, beer is part of it.
Yeah.
And then the last couple are people who are inclusive, right? Those who will seek out people who are new, and people who will fight against cliques with every fiber of their being, because they happen so easily. So many good people that are just part of a clique and they don't even realize it, right? How many people come to our parishes and it's so clear to them so quickly that they don't fit into any of the little groups after Mass. Musicians, I added that because musicians, like, music just opens the door of the heart. And the more musicians you can have that work with you, the better off you're going to be. And finally, storytellers, people who are willing to share their personal journey of faith, right? We all know that the stories are the most important, when we go to a presentation, or what we most remember usually is the story, right? The notes are helpful, but it's the story. So, yeah.
Great. That's it. It reminds me of something that Dan Salucci said last week. He talked about networkers, which I just think is so, like, we need welcomers, but also when I see this, I think about the Called and Gifted. We do the Called and Gifted program from Catherine of Siena Institute.
Yes.
And it identifies the gifts and charisms of individuals and the specific charisms that God has given people to evangelize. And when we can identify those gifts, this list that you created draws those gifts into the work of the mission.
Yes.
I'm not a person who can create a beautiful space, as you can see behind me, but there are people for whom that is their gift.
Yeah.
Let's use them, right? So that's awesome. Great. Michelle, can you move into some, like, specific things that parishes can do for people who come for sacramental prep? I think, and I'm going to preface this a little bit. We hear that phrase, moving from maintenance to mission, so often. And I think we get a sense that that sacramental prep is maintenance work. We have to do it, so we consider it maintenance work. And in fact, I think it can be our biggest missionary field.
Yes.
So I'm gonna toss that back over to you.
Yeah. So I'll change screens in a minute here, but I have very strong feelings about sacrament prep. So, and I don't want to speak in any way, like, I don't know what your current system is. And I mean, our reality here is very different than yours, because we have a restored order. I don't
think. Okay. We don't know.
Yeah. So, but I'm just daring to dream. Okay. And I have long contended that people who bring their kids to get them done, and there is an element of that, right? Not everybody that's coming is the solid Catholic practicing family, and that is the reality. But they give us such an untapped opportunity, like you just said, the mission field. I think if I was running the world, that sacrament prep would be an extended process, and that we ultimately should require lots of them. But that those things that we are requiring need to be meaningful, joyful, fun, dynamic, and ultimately offer variety and choices. So it's not a one size fits all preparation. So maybe, and since we started with a bingo analogy, I would create like a bingo card, like, at the end of this year and a half, whatever, like our Anglican friends, it's 2 years. Kids are in prep for 2 years before they're confirmed, and so whatever the time frame was, you need to complete so many things in each category, right? And some of them are just straight up fun, come to the church picnic. Some are, have attended this liturgy, attended these classes, etc. But the point being to offer families choices, you know, so it might be a child and a parent retreat. It might be having shared a meal for one of the sessions. It might be meeting with a mentoring couple. The sky could be the limit in that. So, but we can look at some specifics here. So again, invite. This comes back to the persistence, right? What we're working on right now in our high schools is, because we do have restored order, I think all sorts of families and kids, like, so grade 2s and 3s, sorry, when I was in parish ministry, it was still grade 7 and 8. And I always had a number of kids, because I did
confirmation, you mean?
Confirmation, yeah.
Okay,
I always had a number of kids that were that would come on their own, basically. You know, they were motivated to come. You're not going to get that with grade 2s and 3s. Like, if their parents don't bring them, that's not happening. And so, but I look at our high schools and I see the hunger there, and I think there's a whole bunch of kids we've missed that might be open to coming. And so in the fall, we're working on a pilot with a high school, you know, to just get in there and build relationship, you know, and then in January, invite, you know, have you made your first communion? Did you miss your first communion? And you don't want, I mean, they're not going to go to the parish and they'll sit with a bunch of grade 2s to be prepared for it, right? So anyways, to recognize how many are out there who do not yet have their sacraments and who maybe at some level are yearning for them, you know, so to invite, to just put it in the parish bulletin as an announcement is not sufficient, right? We need to be inviting people.
Michelle, can you just really quickly explain what restored order means?
So restored order is where the kids, the order is restored to how it was many years ago. So kids receive their first communion and confirmation at the same time. And often it still depends on the parish, very close on the heels of, or very shortly before they do their reconciliation. So in 1 year, in grade 3, they've got it all. So, which is awesome because they have the graces, but we have, you know, we need to find the way to keep them connected.
Right.
So that's what restored order is. And so that's why there's a whole bunch in our high schools that have not made their first communion or been confirmed.
Right. I'm gonna say too, even here where we don't have restored order, so typically confirmation is in grade 7 and or 8. But we still have kids, because we have fewer kids choosing confirmation in grade 8, as we get to high school, there are still kids that we need to invite because they have not been confirmed. So
invite. And when the time's right, you know, and they're not reading your parish bulletin, sorry, so they're not going to see it there. Right. Also, to make allowances to receive people outside of traditional program times. What I mean by that is, like, if you run your confirmation program for, I don't know, 6 weeks of the year, whatever it currently is, and somebody comes in after that, and so what do we have for them? So, or RCIA or whatever it is. Father Mike Schmitz, who I'm sure you've all heard of, tells the story of this young man. He was a worship leader, and he was on an airplane, and he was sitting beside a woman, very high-powered businesswoman, and she was an atheist. They got into this conversation about God for 2 hours. Like he was a missionary for 2 hours, and she was having none of it. And it had become apparent to him over the course of the flight that her foot was very, very sore. And so when he was very bold at the end of the time together, he said, you know what, if you want to meet me in the baggage claim, I'm going to pray over your foot that it would be healed. And if it's healed, then maybe you'll think about Jesus. And so they met in the baggage claim. She came with her cane. He prayed, and lo and behold, a miracle happened in the baggage claim, and her foot was healed. But the problem is, he's now getting on his next flight to carry on. This woman has just had this life-changing experience, which is what happens to me with kids all the time, by the way. They have had this life-changing experience, and now what does he do with her? So he looks up the local Catholic church and sends her there. Says, go here on Sunday, and hopes they're going to look after her, right? And so now if that woman comes through your door Sunday morning, having just met Jesus on fire, maybe inquires about RCIA and gets, oh, yeah, no, we already started, so maybe next year. You know what I mean? So our programs are important. We don't necessarily have the manpower to deal with every person individually in their preparation, but we need to be able to make allowances, you know? And I think we need to assume every person that comes through that door that we don't know is perhaps had an encounter and is looking, you know, for support. So with our families too, give them reasons to come back after prep that meet a real need. Now we know the real need is Jesus, and but they might not be there yet. So how might our community, you know, what is that, you know, can we offer to our baptismal families? Is there a mom and tots group that could happen in the parish? Is there a grandparent and young family matchmaking service? What about parenting courses? You know, just straight up invite the whole community. It doesn't even have to be Christian parenting to start with, just straight up parenting courses.
It's the relevancy piece, right? When people say the church is not relevant, we have to respond to the real relevant needs that they're encountering right now. So
that's right. That's right. So if we can invite them to the, you know, so we invite them to come to Mass afterwards. And don't get me wrong. I mean, the Mass, I wish everybody could be at Mass. It's the summit of our faith, but not everybody's there. And if it can't be all we have to offer. We need steps before that to get them there. Recognizing the reality of our families nowadays. And, you know, you can grieve all you want, the way things used to be or the way you would like things to look. And, you know, maybe we just need to pray the serenity prayer more, you know, having, you know, to have things, to accept things not as I would have them be, but as they are. And to be willing to work with families. I have in my young adult group, a young woman, she's just about going to be a doctor of psychology, and she was in my confirmation class the first year and has been with me ever since as a volunteer. Came to confirmation on her own, does not come from a practicing family. Has a little brother. Her parents are divorced. It's a very bitter divorce. She has a little brother that wanted to make his first communion in the worst way, and she was willing to bring him to the classes. However, because of the custody situation, he's with this parent one week who was open to him going to the classes, and this parent the next week who was not open to letting him go on the Wednesday night to the classes. And that parish would not work with her. Like, no, you need to be there every Wednesday. That's a commitment that you make. And there's just no way that that's ever going to happen short of an act of God and a conversion of the Father, right? So to recognize their reality and to be able to work within it. Like she said, I'll come every week and I'll bring him the notes, but they weren't willing to give. And they broke my heart. Like, I think that is a tragedy. So to recognize the reality of what some of our families are dealing with, you know, what some of our kids are dealing with, and to not be another stumbling block. If the sacrament of celebration must be a huge group affair, the sacrament celebration, so whether it be baptism or whatever, ideally the preparation would not have felt that way, right? And we talked about that a little bit, that there would have been, yeah, you all come together for the celebration, but there has been a couple of different roads to get us here, right there. You know, that the preparation has been more our own and fitted to us. Family-friendly scheduling. You know, to understand what families facing. Like, I have some very solid homeschooling Catholic friends, you know, who have 7 or 8 kids, and they are very motivated to get to all of these classes and do all the prep, and they find it a huge struggle, right? So to just be, again, the need for flexibility and cannot be overstated. Communication is very important. Like, give people all the information they need right at the front, you know, so it can get into their calendars, and then reminders. So, like, you know, create a Facebook group, use Flocknote, like whatever apps you can use to, and then use those to send affirmations, to send prayers. Like, your little Johnny just gave the best answers last night. He's so hilarious. I love him. Lifting him up in prayer today. Like,
love that.
Those little, I can't emphasize enough the power of just those little messages sent. I've done this with the young adults who were formerly in my group, who now moved on with their life. Lots of them don't even live here in the city. And when one comes to my heart, I always send them a message, whether it be on Facebook or if I still have their text. And at one point in time, I was sending them all for Lent. I was sending them just a thought of the day, every day. And one of the young men I hadn't talked to in years. And I mean, I know that he had left the church and that he was not in a good place. And I thought I should just take him off this list because I'm sure it's just an annoyance to him every morning, right? Because he was still in the group. And I had that thought, and I kid you not, God convicted me 10 minutes later. I had that thought, but I thought, I'm on my way out the door. I haven't got time to adjust the group now. He's just getting it this morning and I'll deal with it tomorrow. So I sent it. 10 minutes later, I get a message back from him with a question about the specific thing that I had sent.
Wow.
And we had this conversation. And so I was just honest. And I said to him, I said, I thought I was going to remove you from this list. I thought maybe these were just an annoyance to you. And he said, it's the first thing I look for every morning.
Wow.
Right?
Cool. Yep. Beautiful.
So again, persistence, and just leave the results to God. Just recognizing that each time we gather with these children and family is a gift, and to meet them where they are at and affirm them as parents, even if they're not doing the job we would like to have them do, to find the good that they are doing. I have worked in schools, I have worked in parishes, I have worked for the diocese. I have been a parent, a student, and a grandparent in the Catholic school systems. And so I understand all the frustrations with trying to do sacrament prep with some of our families. But I'm not sure when we decided that getting together and lambasting them all and criticizing them all was going to be the way we were going to get them back. So, to just find ways to be able to affirm them. Does any of that make sense?
It all makes sense. Sorry, I was just reading an email from somebody who's watching. They all make sense. And I think particularly, and I know you and I talked about this a little bit, as we in the Diocese of London are in these families of parishes, it's so important for us to recognize the flexibility piece, because in some families we have 6 parishes that are geographically very spread apart, and to say you need to come to this church on this day every week for the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it is, probably is not going to be the best solution. And so we need to be flexible. And I think it freaks us out when I say us, not me, because I'm not in a parish anymore, but it feels overwhelming to think about adapting things because it's so much easier. But going back to the previous list, we don't need to do it all by ourselves. We have people that have gifts that we need to call forth to be able to help us do this. And the families themselves. There are ways to do this that are not the traditional ways that we've done in the past. And as we move into families, it's very overwhelming. I recognize it's probably the biggest thing I hear from our lay ministers is how much work it is to do family ministry, ministry in a family. So
I wish that we could extend, and we're trying to do it all in 6 weeks. And if they don't make it, I wish that this could be a much broader project. And then we have so much more room for flexibility. Yeah.
It's interesting, Michelle, because I think one of the things that happened during the pandemic was we got to a point where we said, okay, I know you're supposed to do First Communions this spring, but the church is closed, so you can't. So we have to do something different.
Yeah.
Now we're back in okay, well, this is our time frame again. We can still be flexible with that. There is nothing in canon law that says you have to do First Communion in the spring of their grade 2 year or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Let's create some flexibility for everyone involved. Okay, moving along, let's talk about how youth ministry fits into this. And And in some cases, in many cases in our diocese, we don't have specific youth ministry in a parish or a specific youth minister. So
yeah. All right. Well, I come with my obvious bias, right? This is my hat. And so youth ministry can be the foundation for building your parish, for building your church. It's not just a nice add-on. And it saddens me that we as a church often see it as optional. And I mean, that being said, I understand all the difficulties behind it, but we need to figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
When I remember a story my great grandma told me, and she was, so when my grandma was in kindergarten and her sister was in grade 1, and they were going to school and it was winter and they didn't have winter coats. And so my great grandma cut up her winter coat and made it into 2 coats so that they could go to school, and she virtually didn't leave the house for the winter. And the reason I share that story, I mean, I know that seems random, but it really speaks to me of how in families, the kids get the first fruits. We do whatever we need to do to provide for those kids, no matter what we have to sacrifice. And any of you that are parents or grandparents, I know you've lived this, right? And yet we call ourselves a faith family in which caring for our kids is somehow become optional, or an afterthought. And so I think we really need to try and turn that around. When we're dealing with—
Michelle, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, because it also, probably in most dioceses, but I know for certain in our diocese, in our synodal process, it was the number one thing that was brought up. There were a couple of key things. Ministering to families and young people was number one. So sorry. Go ahead.
So it is the priority of our heart, and I'm sure every meeting I ever go to and talk about youth ministry, all the heads nod for the whole hour. But the reality is, it's going to take a lot of sacrifice. There's just no other way to put it for us to get it going. But anyways, whether you have a youth ministry or not, you have young people that you're going to encounter. So let's just start there. So when we're dealing with young people and we're willing to think outside the box, there's so many possibilities for encounter. We have the opportunity to offer a place to belong. When I was in parish ministry, right beside us was a high school, and the back part of our parking lot became Smoker's Corner. And so the parish's response was signs that got bigger and bigger and bigger over time, all over this corner, no smoking. And it wasn't working. And sadly, I was a part-time youth coordinator. I worked in school during the day, but I said, you guys, make chocolate chip cookies and take them out there and hang out while they smoke and let them eat the chocolate chip cookies. And after you've done that for a month, then you can go and say, dudes, this is going to kill you, right? This is not cool. And it's making a mess. You're making all the grandmas crazy. Please stop. And your chances would be high, I would think. But bigger and bigger and bigger signs aren't going to do it.
Yeah. If you know their name, you're going to get a lot more accomplished.
And so, but again, this requires this offering a place to belong. The recognizing that they are all our kids, right? Not just the ones that are in our parish, but all of the kids that we encounter. They're all our kids. And kids teach us to love unconditionally, right? Again, those of you, if as disciples of Christ, I say we're put on this earth. I always say we're put on this earth to learn the lessons of love, so that when we're in heaven someday we fit in, because it's the place of perfect love. and kids will teach you how to love unconditionally, right? Because they come to us they need us the most when they are the least lovable. And then once you actually have young people in your parish, to be on the alert for the need to step in and advocate, because not everybody in your parish will get it. And any of us who have worked in youth ministry have watched straight up just horrific situations with our young people. And so to have those of us who get it to just be on the alert, where you can step in. A very short story, there was a mom in there one Sunday by herself with 4 young kids, and they were unruly. She was having her hands full for sure. And there was an older couple in front of them and an older lady. And the older lady at the end of Mass felt it was her job to turn around and tell that mother that those children were all going to be serial killers if she didn't get it together.
Nice.
Thank God for the older couple that was there, who just zoomed in, loved on them, took them for breakfast. And they, so to just, we need to be aware and to advocate for people who just are probably never going to get it. So
yeah, in a really loving way. They need to feel like they fit and belong. Yeah. Good.
So to sum up, youth ministry fits in, like whether you have a youth ministry or not, you do not have a family. If it doesn't have children in it, and you're not.
And I'm sure it was none of the pastors or priests who are watching this video, this particular webinar, but I've had priests literally say to me, we don't have young people in our parish. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Yeah, absolutely do. They might not be sitting in your pews every Sunday, but that is not, our parish, it does not consist of just the people sitting in the pews. So what are we doing to make them?
My favorite is when I go and they say, oh, we don't need youth ministry because we have no kids. And I say, in your town? Oh, in our town.
Good one. All right, let's move to a little bit different. How do we respond to people who come to us in crisis? What does hospitality look like in that situation?
On one hand, this is just so obvious, right? Like in as much as possible, and I don't think I even necessarily put this, but to meet their immediate needs, and I'm going to jump around here a little bit. When I put refer but accompany, that's what I mean. Like, I think, because I worked in a parish office, people come to the door, they're looking for food, they're looking for these things, and we have a whole list of social services that we refer them to, because we're not a social services agency necessarily. But I just think there's got to be a way to sort of combine those a little bit. It feels very dismissive at the door to me sometimes. So yes, to refer them, but like, can we invite them? Can we pray for them before they go? Can we keep some snacks on hand that we can at least offer something for the moment, right? So when people are in crisis who come to us, to see the person, right? It's like the old story with St. Francis, who encountered a beggar. And St. Francis, of course, himself had nothing. And he said to the beggar, I'm sorry, my brother, I have nothing to give you. And he said, it is the fact that you call me brother that is everything, right? So to not be afraid to look at people in their pain, right? To not look away from the pain. On a practical note, there are some parishes here in Saskatoon, not in our diocese. I think it's just, they employ a parish nurse.
Funny you should say that. We have a couple of parish nurses in our diocese. We've had some, some have left, but we have a parish nursing program we're working on.
So God bless you. I had never heard of it. So like that just says very clearly, right, that there's somewhere for people who are ill or in crisis to go as a starting point. And it certainly speaks to a priority in the parish. I would encourage us to let us remember the lessons we learned during COVID about what it's like to be isolated. And for some people, this is their reality all the time. During COVID, as many dioceses and parishes did, we got on the phone and we just started calling people, right? And particularly in our office, those who had been supporters of our appeal, we just started calling everyone to see how they were. And one family said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to them, because they are very ill. They are never been able to leave the house and go to Mass. And they feel more connected now to the diocese than they had ever, because the bishop gave weekly messages and because they could join Mass online in their own diocese as opposed to something from the States. And I thought it's very important that as we move on to the normal, that we remember that there are still those people for whom those services were very important. And so to remember to, I think it's still important that we have Mass live streamed. I still think it's important that our bishops give a video message. I still think it's important that we reach people online for those who cannot be with us. And then to think practically and outside the box, again, what actual physical hospitality can your parish offer? So like we have these buildings that often sit heated and paid for and empty, like when it's 50 below and we have homeless people outside. Like I understand that there's, and I'm just dreaming out loud right now. I understand that I'm not the one that has to deal with the liabilities and the practicalities and that, but I read about a parish in the States who just opened their doors at 8 o'clock every morning for morning mass. And one of the real challenges for homeless people is a lack of sleep, right? Because they have to stay up all night to protect, like they don't ever get to let their guard down. And so they would open their doors for mass, and people who came for mass sat at the very front, and in the back, homeless people came in and just slept on the pews and could be safe and quiet, until the office staff left, and then they locked it up. But then they could rest, So that's just one example of how we can, we're blessed with these facilities. How can we offer them for the use of reaching out to people and meeting their real needs? So, that's morning. We can talk about that in a minute. So those who come to us who are mourning, at funerals are another opportunity, like weddings, like sacrament prep. And again, you need the manpower, but if there can be follow-up, one of the one of the parish workers in our diocese told about, a situation where there was an old couple here. The kids had all moved away. They came home for the funeral because dad had died. Mom's alone. They're very worried about mom. And he just said to one of the sons as he was talking, he said, "Don't worry, we're going to follow up on her. We're going to look after her," and like that was life-changing for that growing child, right? In how they saw the church. And, so when, especially when they're in our midst, and somebody's lost a child, or we had a suicide in our parish, and that mom comes alone to mass. And I watched her all through COVID, and she would just sit in the pew afterwards, and you could just feel like she was waiting for somebody to come. Sorry, but and nobody ever did. And so finally, I didn't know her that well, but I knew of her, right? And so finally, I just sat beside her and I said, "Can I pray for you?" And so I prayed, and then I said, "Would you like to go for coffee?" And she's like, "I'd love to go for coffee," right? And so, it's not rocket science, but people just need to be seen. And I mean, that funeral was we buried that 18-year-old young man in our parish, but people are afraid to see the pain, right? And we have enough of our own as well, but to find ways when we are strong enough to enter into other people's pain.
Yeah.
Grief groups, support for the divorced and separated. There's a million possibilities, but again, it's just to see, it's to see the person. And the other thing before we move on is I would say to try to find ways to include those things that are important to them at the funeral. Like this was dad's favorite country and Western song, and they want to have it played at the funeral. And I'm just like, you're just cringing. Like, the liturgists want to crawl under a bench at this point. And no, they can't have it at that point, maybe, but how can we help them accommodate it some way, right? To not just disregard those things which are important to them.
Yeah. This is a real sidebar, but I before we got on, I was meeting with our IT department, who's going to do the next 2 workshops, and we were talking about our DDMS system, which is our database for parishioners. And one of the things they talked about was when you move somebody from, when you indicate someone is deceased in the database system, to automatically move them to create a group that is a grief support group, so that when we're doing some follow-up, we already know who falls in that group. If someone, starts up a bereavement group, or even just sends out cards to those people who have lost loved ones, it's so simple in our system to do that. We'll talk about more about that in a couple of weeks. But
that's amazing.
I just thought it was a really, I'm like, wow, that's just to be able to follow up with individuals. So yeah, great. Michelle, what about, we've talked well about the people who are already, we're encountering in some way. What about those people who don't come to our parish?
Okay. Well, it's important to note, first of all, that we are a geographical church, not a denominational one. So guess what? We're responsible for all the souls, or the parish priest is, but by extension, our parishes are responsible for all the souls in that geographical area, not just the ones who come to our parish on Sunday morning. So when I say they're all our kids, or they're all our people, they really are. So it's very important that we are part of our communities. We should have a presence in our schools. And if you're blessed to have Catholic schools, like I would be, have people from your parish like living there, being as helpful as they can, but including our public schools. Like if there is a public school in your neighborhood, can you offer your church hall as a place for them to go when there's an emergency? You know how if they need to evacuate, and there's a place nearby. Would it hurt us to drop off donuts and coffee the first day and wish them a great year from your neighbors down the road, right? Same for Teacher Appreciation Day. To reach out to those public schools, daycares that are right in our, and in some of this is intertwining too, right? Who's in your community? What can you offer? Like, can we offer parenting courses that are free? Can we offer English as a second language courses? If we're in an area where there's lots of new Canadians, to just open our doors, literally and figuratively, and be as helpful as we can. I have an interesting story. The same friend, the one who I talked about the funeral, who is a parish worker in a parish. Every spring, this parish has a big picnic outside, and they have bouncy castles and they have hot dogs. And he says, Sunday morning, I'm out there early getting it all ready because after Mass is going to be the big picnic. And he said, this woman walks by with her dog and says, oh, what's going on here? And he says to her, oh, this is our parish picnic, and so on and so forth. And she said to him, oh, and she lived in the neighborhood. I thought this place had been closed for years. It was just like a knife in his heart. But he had to stop and ask himself, what do we mean to this community? What do we mean to the people around us? They don't know who we are.
We have a family of parishes in Windsor that's in a pretty core area, and they have in the one of the parishes they have an outreach program. So they have an outreach coordinator. They do free meals. They do produce pickup. They had, in fact, and I've always said, out of my 3 children, I have one that does not, that doesn't go to church, which is actually not bad odds, I think, in today's world. But I'm very convinced that if he and his wife were to come back to church, it's going to be in a parish community that looks after the people in the community, not just the people sitting in the pews on Sunday.
Yes.
So
100%. And it should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So,
no.
Okay, let's talk about finally the hospitality at Mass, because I think, sometimes that's our first place to go. We're gonna wrap up with that. So we have greeters at the door. Yeah. I'm a greeter at the door. What else do we need?
So, all right. So I would say the greeters at the door are so important, but we need greeters of all ages and all different, walks of life that are going to greet in very different ways. And actually, one of the things that happened, I don't know if everybody found this experience, but over COVID, what really touched me, I said, like, when I go to church now, I want somebody to ask how I'm feeling, and I want them to take my temperature and talk to me about my week while they're waiting. I had an actual encounter with the greeters during COVID, right? It was delightful. I got to know lots of them in ways that I hadn't in years. To recognize that they are directors of first impressions, right? And that's a corporate term, but that's where it starts, when those people who are maybe just trying to come back, or maybe, you know, mom, they're home and mom is in the hospital and they're desperate and they walk through the door. Like, how they are treated and seen when they walk through that door is going to be key. Little hospitality bags for families, you know, cut crayons and coloring sheets, and I would stay away from food because allergies, like, yeah, I wouldn't put food items in there, but I have a I can't believe all the bingo references. I don't play bingo, people, but I have a bingo, like a sort of a bingo card that I have laminated that, you know, kids can check off with a dry erase marker as each thing in the mass happens, right? And fill their card. To match up with a grandparent, I thought this was brilliant. I have a friend who has 4 boys, and what they did was they got to know, you know, the older people who were widows and widowers in their parish, and they matched on Sundays when they got there. Each boy went and sat with one of them, and that grandparent was then not alone, and that kid got special attention, and there was no fighting during mass. And, you know, but I thought that was just one family's initiative, but I thought that's brilliant and not hard to do. So to intercede when parishioners behave badly, I told you about the serial killer incident. Introductions before mass. Now, this only works if there's some substance to it. Like, to have people sit in the same pews they've been sitting in for 40 years and introduce themselves before mass to the same people that they've known for 40 years is not super helpful. When I was at a parish, actually the Divine Renovation Parish in Halifax, when I was there, they do something before mass where they invite you to introduce the person to your left or whatever, yourself, and ask how you can pray for them during that mass. And so I'm just a guest in this parish. I sat down beside this woman who introduces herself and shares, when I ask how I can pray for her, and shares with me that her daughter, like, she has a daughter who is missing. Oh my gosh. And I thought, I wonder if anybody, you know, in this parish would even know, you know, and so, and then at the time, when it comes time for the prayers of the faithful, they have, for the person who is sitting to your left, you may now pray, you know. And so people pray intentionally for that intention, which they have. So now, if I belong to that parish, there's no way I'm never not connecting with that woman again when I see her, right? Because it's not just the name. So, and then I would say the same thing, offering prayer ministry after mass. You know, people are coming to mass and they're broken and they're hurting and they've had, you know, they're carrying burdens we don't even know. And yes, we lay it at the foot of the cross and we give it to Jesus in the Eucharist, but sometimes we need Jesus with skin on, right? And so to offer to just have a couple people stay back and say, hey, if you're having a week, or if you have a specific intention, it'd be our honor to pray for you. And it's probably would take a while to build. They might just have to pray silently, you know, but you might be surprised as well as people got used to that. So, you know, praying with people is certainly a way to build intimacy and community. Yeah.
We had a friend, we talked about, my husband and I have talked about, you know, name tags, and name tag Sunday and those kinds of things. And we have a friend who's like, no, we don't just need our name tag on the front of us. We need our name tag on the back. So the people sitting behind us, who you maybe have sat behind for how long, but you don't actually know their name.
Yeah.
And I know, so I'm, you know, we moved into this new community 7 or 8 years ago now. I still feel relatively new. Obviously, we've gotten to know people, but we're super intentional about it. But I don't know people's histories. I don't know the family connections. I don't know, you know, things that if you grow up in a parish, those are the things you know. Yeah. But I think it's really important to recognize, even if there's one person who doesn't know somebody. I go back to the guy with the hat on. Yeah. So important. There was we in my previous parish, I remember being on parish council, sitting in a parish council meeting, and we had somebody relatively new on parish council. And there was some conversation around the table, and somebody said, oh, somebody who'd been there, you know, long-term, like, we're a really welcoming parish. And this individual said, not so much. He said, I've been coming to this parish for like 3 years or 5 years or something. No one has said a word to me. till my wife started joining me, and she was one of those people that you can't ignore. Like, she will not allow herself to be ignored.
Yeah.
And he said, until she started coming with me, nobody knew I was here. And, I think we're all guilty of that. And, from my perspective, when I was working in a parish, I always used to be afraid of saying, are you new here? Because inevitably what I get is, no, I've been coming here for 3 years and nobody's ever noticed me. And then I feel like an idiot. And so I changed my language to, I should know your name. And I'm sorry, I don't. And I probably will have to ask you 3 more times because my brain is a sieve, but it's a way to start the conversation, right? My husband's famous. 2 weeks ago at Mass, last week we were at the cottage, so we were at Mass there, but at our parish Mass, there was a gentleman sitting in front of us. And after Mass, he just tapped the guy on the shoulder and said, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. My name's Tim. And I'm like, God, you're so bold. I'm super uncomfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. But if we did more of that, people would feel like, yes, and people want, if you know somebody, I don't even know, I haven't looked at the participant list. I'm going to tell one other story here. And I'll even tell you who told me. Bernadine Kettler's told me this. You wouldn't know her, but many people listening will know who she is. She tells a story about when her children were little, and there was a family that came into the narthex at church and was relatively new, and there was a social after Mass, and Father literally pulled Bernadine aside and said, Bernadine, this is, Mary Jones, and these are her 4 little children. And I know they're, you have 4 little kids, and, maybe you could invite them to the social after Mass. He connected them. And she said, we're still friends today because somebody made the connection and introduced them. When I walk into the parish social, and again, I've said this before, if I have my Clare Bondi Diocese of London name tag on, I will go out there and mingle. If I'm Clare Bondi parishioner, it's not in my nature. I'm much more introverted. I'm uncomfortable inserting myself into those cliques you talked about. And so I think as parishioners, we need to be the ones to take that first step and to engage people. And it's not always easy. So.
And none of this is easy, and we're not going to do any of it perfectly. And but if we all have it on our brain, we can hold each other accountable and help each other, right?
Yeah. All right. Anything else on your end, Michelle, before I turn it over? Okay.
Well, I thought I just wrote up this little conclusion because I think it sums up how I feel, and it is this: catechesis, conversion, service, openness to receiving and sharing spiritual gifts only happens when we feel safe and welcome, and like we are amongst people we can trust, and thus allow ourselves to be vulnerable. No real ministry happens until we get the hospitality right. So Amen. It's not fluff.
Amen. It's not fluff. That actually, I wrote that down when you said that at the beginning. I think it's super important. All right. Thanks, Michelle. I'll let you stop sharing. And if there are any questions, please pop them into the Q&A box. And I'll just give a minute or two for that. One of the things that I think, I'm going to go back a little bit, Michelle, to your sacramental prep sort of bingo card analogy or whatever that is. What are some of the specific things you might do when it comes to sacramental prep?
Well, I think, so with confirmation, there's certain things they need to learn, right? The gifts of the Spirit, we want them to know that. And with Eucharist, there's certain things they need to know, but I just think that those things should come later in the process when they actually trust us and will listen to us and are comfortable and might actually receive it, So I think that the beginning parts of it, I mean, church halls are wonderful, but they're not meant for everything. Like we ran a pilot, which I thought was quite successful just before COVID with a parish. And what we did is the families signed up for their, and again, ours are grade 2 to 3. So would be, but so maybe it would work for your first communion, but not your confirmation. Anyways, and we had host couples. So the host couple would have 2 to 3 families over. And we sent a little script for the host couple. This is, you're going to watch this VeggieTales video with them. You're going to have this little discussion with the families. Here's a little craft. We gave them a bag. The kids are going to do this craft. And while they're doing the craft, the 6 of you are going to sit on the deck and have a beer, or sit around your table and have coffee and dessert and get to know. So they then know some other couples, and they know this couple who's already in the community. And so then when they come to Mass, oh, there's Grandpa George, you know, whose house they have been at. And that's a completely different animal than just sitting down doing your time at a table in a church hall, right? And it's a lot more work, and you really have to sell people on it. But it had really good fruit, you know?
Yeah.
So things like, you know, I used to take my confirmants to an out-of-town retreat at a camp in the fall. That's how we started. That's how confirmation started. And, you know, it was a year long. It started with this retreat. I just required them to come to most of the youth group stuff that I did, quite frankly. And then we also inserted some instruction in there that was specific to them. And by the end of that year, we retained 3/4 of them, you know. The retention rate was high. But I really recommend, if you can get, especially if you have grade 7s and 8s, get them away for an overnight somewhere fun, a camp, you know, that bonds them as a group. It gives you an opportunity to get to know them. That's a really solid, you know. And then church picnics or service. Kids love service. You know, you're going to come with the parish to this soup kitchen. Like, I would use, Claire, and I don't have it to share right now, but I would use the grid from youth ministry.
Right. Yeah.
All the different areas in which we do ministry. I think you could draw things from each of those areas for the families to do.
Right. And I like the idea that it's not a one size fits all. It's not a like, this is what every family must do. Also, because you have families that are at very different stages of their faith development, right? So you have families that need a little more catechesis, but you have families that need just to be introduced to, they just need to be introduced to who Jesus Christ is. Like, that's, you know, and they're not gonna even hear the rest of it because they have no relationship with Jesus.
Yes.
And that relationship with Jesus gets built by the relationship with the people in the parish. So,
I had a say to me once, "This is all good, but it's based on a rumor," he said to me. I haven't met him.
Yeah. Very important. So Michelle, and maybe this isn't really off the topic question, but I know I've heard from so many priests and lay ecclesial ministers in our diocese about how overwhelmed they are with doing the things that need to get done. You know, it's very overwhelming. I do think we need to think outside the box and recognize that we can't do what we've always done.
Yes.
And I'm hoping we've learned some things from COVID in the midst of that. But how do we invite people in the pews who may have some ideas to take, I don't want to say take control, that's probably the wrong word, but take ownership of those ideas and run with them? Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the $1 million question, right? I think there's just no way, I don't know of any way to do it other than shoulder tapping, right? I mean, I think if it were me, I would start with a group of my parish leaders, who are the movers and shakers in your, who knows everybody, who knows who has, you know, and then with them brainstorm a list. They each know 40, 50 people, right? And so make a huge list of people that you can invite, you know, and then break it up and you just have to do the inviting. It's a laborious process, but it is the most success. I mean, you can put it in the bulletin just for good measure. Maybe you'll get one that way, but I've never had any success with that.
Yeah.
But there's just, and that's why I think we put ourselves in these time constraints. Like, can we just have a year to just like let's not put such tight timelines on everything, right? Let's give ourselves time to meet people, to get to know people, to be in relationship with them, so that by the time we celebrate this sacrament with them, they're actually a part of our community, or at least a good number of them are. You're not going to have 100% success, of course not.
Yeah.
But I think just start gathering. If I was a parish leader, I would gather all the movers and shakers, the ones that, who have some influence. I would specifically invite maybe some new people, some young people, to sit on a short-term committee, because we all know that once you join a committee on the church, you are on it for life, right? So like a committee that's going to meet 4 times, and this is our goal, and you need a list of 200 people that you start shoulder tapping, and then maybe you'll get 20, 30, which would be pretty solid start.
Yeah, I think too, in our the model of family of parishes that we have, is that there has to be some level of trust in the people that we're forming to do these other things, that feed people outside of the Mass, that we let, we train them, we prepare them, and then we let them do it. I think there's a feeling like, I know in some places where there's a feeling that the pastor has to be at everything. And that is not a reality we can live with right now. I mean, if you have, even 3 parishes, that you cannot be at everything. So empower people to take ownership, which can be a little scary. And then if you have to, it's not all going to go perfect. If you have to come back and, rewrite the ship, then you rewrite the ship. But keep, I think we need to empower people to do things, to help people feel like they belong. Yeah.
It's not possible because we've already had COVID and we're already behind, but it would just be wonderful if we could just have a reset year. A year where we're just going to build community.
Right.
And then implement all the things the next year.
Yeah. I think one of the things we're trying to set up with this Nurturing Joy initiative that we're doing, and we've got 3 phases and so this is the encounter phase that we recognize. So what we're leading up to is that when we get to the point where we're super intentional about inviting people back, that we have something really lovely to invite them back to. And it's not, again, Mass is the source and summit of our faith. But if you don't get it, and you're not in relationship with Jesus, sitting through Mass can be a painful experience. And I can sit through a painful Mass, which I did at the cottage last weekend, because I know I am there, right? But if you don't have a good sense of that, sitting through a painful Mass is just a painful thing that you're never going to go back to. So we need to make sure that this is a warm and wonderful place. And even if we miss the mark sometimes, that there's enough people and relationships there that draw us back in. Yeah. So
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. I have a few other announcements. I'm super glad we got you on and we got your slideshow on. I'm going to share screen just to promo. Actually, I'm going to remove Michelle's spotlight here so she can take a break. I'm just going to share screen. We have 2 more workshops in this session. Next Thursday will be telephone best practices for encounter. I am not going to tell you what parish I called this week, but I am going to tell you that I called a parish and asked to speak to someone. And the individual, as soon as I said, can I speak with so-and-so, I got cut off and sent to so-and-so, to their voicemail. My presumption is that person was actually on another line. Great. But it felt super cold to me. And it's our first line of welcome. And we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for, I called a parish this week, and they still had, press whatever number for our COVID protocols. I'm hoping that those are, anyway, you get the point. That's what we're going to talk about next week. And then the following week is going to be DDMS. I had a preview of that workshop this morning. It's a lot. One of the things they're going to touch on is, and when I say it's a lot, because DDMS, there is so much there that we can use. One of the things they're going to touch on is why it's important that DDMS is used beyond the parish secretary, and with our LEMs and our priests as well. And there might be more information than you can handle if you're not familiar with DDMS, but you can just tune that out and multitask at the same time. But there is so much there that can help us be welcoming people, welcoming communities. It's definitely worth tuning into. Again, it will be recorded. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And now I'm going to invite just a real quick promo from Christine Coyle. So let me just get Christine up here. So Christine, I'm going to let you give a little promo for your fall workshops, and then we will say goodbye.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Michelle. That was amazing. I could listen to her all day. I just told her she should write a book of all her stories. But just thank you. Like, what a great starting point for, I'm doing 3 webinars next month in September. Information is going to be coming out soon on, as a family parish, how do we effectively minister in sacramental prep, youth and family ministry, and how to engage families. So just really going to come up with some great strategies that are, to think outside the box, what will work for your parish, your family of parish. So I'm really looking forward to that next month. So it's lunchtime webinar. But yeah, we have the promo poster, and the links will be coming out soon. So looking forward to seeing you all, or, discussing with you next month. Thanks, Claire.
All right. Thanks. I was supposed to share a slide on that, and it didn't come up. So I apologize for that. I don't know where it went. It's the day of glitches. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully you can join us next week. And at again, 1 o'clock, and the following week on the 18th for the DDMS. Take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon.